Hello, everyone, and welcome to BodyBags. I'll be your reviewer for today. I'm Lonnie from Tats, and yeah, I'm sure you've all pretty much heard that here. I thought it was going to be next month, but it turns out it's actually going to be next spring. That we're going to have a remake of Salem's Lot. Needless to say, I'm cautiously optimistic. Hopefully, it'll be good because James Wan is producing it. It's going to be made by, I believe, it's the people behind the Conjuring films and the It remake. But the thing is we already did have a remake in 2004, which is the movie that I'm going to be talking about. Now, the original Salem's Lot is it's awesome. It's fantastic. I wanted to review it on the channel, but it's been done before. But oh yeah, it's like the original Salem's Lot and Martin. Those two are always neck and neck for me. Like which one is the best vampire movie? And it's always those two neck and neck every single time. But here in 2004, they TNT decided to do a remake of it, and honestly, it's interesting. You know, so I don't think I'm pretty sure you're familiar with the storyline. I don't think I really need to tell you too much. The story is about Ben Mears in this version, played by Rob Lowe. He moves to the town of. He comes back to the town of Salem's Lot, and they made some unnecessary changes here. I don't understand why. I mean, in this mini series, Ben Mears is still a writer, but the thing is like now, for whatever reason, they put in that he was like a veteran. I think during the Iraq War, and he was a POW, and like the book that he wrote was like an account of him being a POW and stuff like that. And like a lot of people, in this version, like a lot of people don't think much of him as a writer, and uh, they think he's kind of a hack. And then when he comes back to Salem's Lot, then people find out that he wants to write about the town of Salem's Lot, write about the Marston House, and he becomes this kind of pariah, and like everybody wants to run him out of town. And in the beginning, like it's like in the original, and in the book, like when Susan finds out that you know Ben wants to write a book about the Marston house and everything, just kind of like, oh, okay, well, whatever. But in this, it's like once she finds out he wants to write that book, she's like, like I hate you, I want you gone, and all this kind of stuff. It's weird, but so anyway, so similar to the original miniseries, there's a new antique shop opened in Salem's Lot by Richard Stryker. In this version, played by Donald Sutherland. You can maybe see him there. So, you know, and then we have the arrival of Kurt Barlow, and in this version is played by Rutger Hauer. And then of course, vampires slowly begin to start taking over the town and all this kind of stuff, and chaos ensues. And then it's up to Ben to and Mark Petrie to, try to defeat the evil. One thing I will say about this miniseries is, in essence, it is a bit more faithful to the book. So I mean, if you were kind of curious, there are certain changes that were made. I mean, for like example, in the original miniseries, the climax takes place at the Marston house, whereas in the book and in this miniseries too, there are vampires in the Marston house, and you know they go there to fight the vampires, but that happens like kind of like at the midway point, and then you come to find out that actually the climax actually takes place in the boarding house where Ben Mears is staying. It turns out that Barlow is actually sleeping in the basement of Eva Miller's boarding house. So there are some things, but that's the way it was in the book and everything. And one thing you got to kind of remember about Salem's Lot, if you read the book or if you've heard Stephen King talk in interviews about it, Salem's Lot really was always meant to be. It was meant to be King's version of Dracula, and that's you know. And if you read the book and you kind of see this miniseries, you can kind of see more of a Dracula like feel to it, you know, um, like in the book Dracula and the different versions, especially the Coppola version. There ends up being a team of vampire hunters. You have Van Helsing, You have Quincy Morris, you have Arthur Holmwood, you have Dr. Seward, and you have Jonathan Harker. In this version, in this version of Salem's Lot, now in the original, you kind of had the other, you had like Dr. Norton helping, but in this version, you know, you have Ben, you have Mark Petrie, you have Father Callahan, you have the Doctor. So it's kind of like they have their own kind of like, band of vampire fighting fighters and things like this. And but just you know, I would say if you really want to watch this, because if you really kind of want to see a little bit more of a faithful adaptation of the book, and if you're kind of curious, like what were some things that were in the book that they kind of changed, for the Toby Hooper miniseries. Um, One of the biggest things that you're definitely going to notice as a change is the character of Kurt Barlow and the character of Richard Stryker. Now, okay, you got to remember, like I said, the Book of Salem's Lot was meant to be King's version of Dracula. So in the book Salem's Lot and in this version of the miniseries, really what ends up happening is that Barlow is meant to be kind of Dracula, and Richard Stryker is meant to be more of like a Renfield kind of a character. Okay, and so Donald Sutherland, honestly, the character of Richard Stryker, both in the book and in this miniseries, the character of Richard Stryker really isn't in the story that much, but because they had James Mason in the original, so a lot of it they beefed up his role to play Stryker. But like another thing though too is that when Toby Hooper, the one thing now King always said that he loved Toby Hooper's miniseries of Salem's Lot. He loved the adaptation. The one thing he didn't like was that in the book Barlow is meant to be a Dracula type of figure, whereas you know you know, Toby Hooper went for more than, modeled him after the Nosferatu vampire. And that was the one thing the King didn't like about the original miniseries. Other than that, though, King was very much impressed with it and enjoyed Toby Hooper's adaptation. So, but you got to remember, so it's like, the thing is, though, it's like a lot of the lines and stuff. Okay, the biggest example of this is the scene where okay, remember in the original Salem's Lot where, Barlow crashes through the window of the Petrie household and he kills Mark's parents and he's about to kill Mark, and Father Callahan is, got the crucifix and is trying to fight him off. And then Stryker comes into the room and, saying the lines, like, back holy men, back shaman, back priest, and all this kind of stuff, and say, like, what would you give to reprieve this boy, to save him for another night? And your my faith against my face against your faith, and all this kind of stuff. Now, all those lines that James Mason spoke were actually lines that the character of Barlow, but obviously because in the Toby Hooper version, Barlow doesn't speak; he's more animal than human, and things like that, and more monster than human. So they ended up giving his lines to Stryker. So it's kind of so in a way it is kind of like it does kind of make you think just a tiny little bit about. It doesn't really make a lot of sense how when Barlow goes there, how Stryker just also happens to be there. But let's face it, though. I mean, you're giving James Mason a chance to be awesome. So you kind of like, you know what? I don't care. I just get to watch James Mason be cool. So that's worth it for that alone. But so you have in this version you have Rutger Hauer playing the character, and he does a fine job. I mean, come on, if you ever need somebody to play a really good villain, when he was alive, who better than Rutger Hauer? Rutger Hauer always did great as the villain. But there are certain things you're going to notice that like I said, just in this version, it's more similar to the book in that Stryker was just kind of more of a Renfield kind of a character. He didn't have as much of a role or as much of a presence in the story the way that James Mason did in the original film. But so like I said, there are differences between, and this is a little bit more faithful to the book. So if you want to check it out for those reasons, you have a really good stellar cast in this movie, in this miniseries. Like I said, you got Rob Lowe, you got Donald Sutherland, you got Rutger Hauer, you got Andre Braugher, You have uh, Dan Byrd from who played Bobby in the Hills Have Eyes remake. He plays Mark in this version. Who else is in this? Samantha Mathis, James Cromwell. You have James Cromwell in here playing Father Callahan, things like this. And so, I would say, yeah. I mean, Curiosity. It's I mean, I still much prefer the Toby Hooper miniseries, but this it's definitely worth a look see, and it's interesting. And like I said, it's more kind of like if you're interested in like, well, I want to kind of see like what maybe they changed up from the book and everything else. One thing I will say though is like this movie, oh, it's the vampires. They have a good look to them. They do look effective and creepy, but they don't look as scary as they do in the Toby Hooper miniseries. I mean, it's like in the Toby Hooper miniseries, those things look like just they looked otherworldly. They just looked so demonic, and they really did. They almost look like devils right out of hell. And in this here, they kind of they're creepy looking. They got the creepy eyes and things like this, but they're just not as they're just not as scary. They kind of look more like your kind of generic vampires you've seen in multiple vampire movies. There was just something about the way the vampires looked in the Toby Hooper miniseries. Just they're just like pants crapping terrifying, whereas in this one, it's like, yeah, they look creepy, but just not as spooky. Another thing that I think really hurts this miniseries is there is a lot of bad CGI and a lot of really scary moments are kind of really undercut in this miniseries because of the bad CGI. Like a good example, a prime example, is the Mike Ryerson scene. Now, okay, like we all remember, if you've seen the original Salem's Lot, like the part where the character of Jason Burke. Now, in the book and in this miniseries, the character's name is Matthew Burke, and that's another little change from that was in this that wasn't in the original. Now, one thing in the book was when the Mike Ryerson vampire comes into Burke's house. At the time, Burke is talking with Susan, and in this version, Susan is with him, and they're talking. And so he hears the noise. He goes upstairs and he sees Mike is, in his house, and they have the scene and all this kind of stuff. Now it's the same thing like in this, where she's there, and when he has his heart attack, she's there, so she calls the ambulance. That's how he gets to the hospital. Whereas in the original miniseries, he barely manages to call the ambulance himself. But the thing is like when you go in there, there's like all this. It's like it was so creepily written in the book, and I think if they'd done it like that, I think like if I remember, like he opens the door and it's like it's dark in the room, but he could see like Mike laid out on the bed, like a almost like a corpse, like a dead body, and he's like kind of like this. And then he kind of like raises up and then turns and looks at him and then says the line, like, look at me, teacher, and all this kind of stuff. And then, like, he gets off the bed, slowly starts coming to him, and then he takes the cross and everything else. It's like, the way it was written in the book was so terrifying. And obviously, the way Toby Hooper did it in the original miniseries was absolutely frightening as well. But this here, it's like, they do this, kind of like really kind of crappy, like him just kind of, just like, he's moving around like really fast, like here, and like getting closer to him and stuff like that. And then, for whatever reason, they added this into the miniseries, which it goes nowhere. It really means nothing, doesn't pay off, and it adds nothing. It's kind of like, why did they even add this? But they add this whole thing that the character of Burke might actually be kind of this kind of closet homosexual, and that he had a sexual attraction to Mike, but it goes nowhere, And instead of fighting him off with the cross and everything, like he sees the kind of like the mortician, the mortician stitches and everything, and he's like, "What? What's wrong with me?" and everything, and he's like, "You died, Mike. You died." And he just turns around. He turns around, jumps out the window. So it's like a lot of the scenes, like that's the thing, like a lot of the scenes in here, they don't pack the same punch as they did in the Toby Hooper miniseries. One thing that I know, like a lot of people I've talked to who are fans of the book, and they like they enjoy the Tobe Hooper miniseries. One thing, there was a scene in the book that, like, if you tell people this, it scares the hell out. Like, it sticks in your head. It sticks in your head. It scares the hell out of people, and it really resonates with them. Now, in the book, there's this part in the book where Charlie Rhodes, who's the bus driver, he wakes up in the middle of the night and he hears the horn in his school bus going off. So he goes out to check, and he goes into the bus, and he sees like all of the kids. The bus is filled with all of these vampire kids, and they're all sitting there, and like sitting there like they're getting ready to go to school, and then the doors close behind him, and he tries to get out and he can't get out, and then these vampire children slowly rise up and start closing in on him, and then they get him. Now, anybody, like I've talked to so many people, and you tell them that's part of the book. It's like, in their minds, it's like, oh my God, that's frightening. And then add on top, and it's like, also too, it's like, think of how scary that would have been if that had been in the Tobe Hooper miniseries. Especially with how friggin' creepy those vampire kids looked in that miniseries. If you'd done that, that would have been a scene, honestly, had they given Tobe Hooper the chance to do that, and with how creepy those friggin' vampire kids looked, that probably would have been one of the scariest scenes in movie history. Like, I think, honestly, that would have been one of those things like, just, like people would never sleep again after watching something like that. But, and it is in here, it is in this miniseries, but like I said, the vampires don't look as scary. You got a lot of the crappy CGI, all this other kind of stuff. So it's a lot of the, really good scary scenes are really kind of undercut by the bad CGI. So unfortunately, there's that. Let's see, what else was there? But anyway, I don't hate this miniseries, but honestly, if you ask me, like, hey, you want to watch Salem's Lot? I'm always going to go for the Tobe Hooper version. I'm going to pick that over this. But, still, this is worth checking out. Like I said, if you're a fan of the story, if you're kind of curious about, like, what was changed from the book, but just don't expect this to be as scary as the Tobe Hooper miniseries. Just the way Hooper did it with such style and class and everything else, and the fact that, like, there was no bad CGI, it was all makeup. Tobe Hooper, like rigging these cranes, for the vampire kids to float around and all that kind of stuff. Like in this here, it's like, it's a lot of, like, looks like a lot of bad green screen, and like I said, just kind of like bad CGI. But you get past that. You do have a good cast. There are good performances in this. Nobody's really phoning it in. But just, yeah. I mean, it's okay, but just so. But anyway, I just kind of wanted to talk about this. And of course, I ran long again, but I would say, yeah, check it out if you're curious. So now it kind of makes me wonder, what are we going to get next year? Because we got another remake of this coming out. What are we going to end up with? Are we going to end up with, is it going to be kind of like the 2013 Carrie, where it's just kind of a lifeless rehash of De Palma's film? Or in this case, a lifeless rehash of Tobe Hooper's film? Is it going to be kind of a lifeless rehash of this? Is it going to be kind of like this, kind of monster hybrid of both? Who knows? I mean, only time will tell, but hopefully it'll be good. But until then, so I would say, yeah, go ahead and check it out, but just don't expect much. It's not gonna win you over. It's definitely not gonna steer you away. But I would say, curiosity's sake, and like I said, if you want to see what, a version that's a little bit more faithful to the book, go ahead and check it out. So that's it. So if anybody took the time to watch all of this, I thank you for doing it, and I appreciate you for doing it. I really do. I honestly hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please leave it a like. If you haven't already, go and subscribe to the BodyBags channel. We have a different reviewer, one for every day of the week. I'm the Saturday reviewer. We have a lot of great guys. Everybody's doing great stuff. And we have more fun weeks ahead of us, and, more fun stuff to talk about. So we hope you all come back. So that's it, everybody. Take care. Have a good night, and I'll see you later.